Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here again to tackle some complex history, dense research, and frankly, sometimes really uncomfortable truths, trying to figure out what really matters.
And today, we are stepping into the Roman Empire. We're talking about the 2nd century AD specifically. It's this period of, incredible sophistication, but it's built on some truly systematized brutality.
So let's set a scene. Imagine it's about 120 AD, a big Roman villa somewhere. There's a young man, maybe mid-teens. He's clearly exhausted, been serving wine all night to these powerful senators.
Right, and the crucial thing is those senators, they're talking about him right there, discussing his looks, his price tag.
As if he's not even there, just completely invisible as a person.
Exactly. But here's the kicker, the real Roman paradox.
Yeah.
This boy, this piece of property, he's worth something like 40,000 sesterces.
Which is just astronomical. I mean, more than most regular citizens would see in their entire lives, right?
Absolutely. And that paradox, this immense value, this monetary worth wrapped around complete and utter dehumanization, that's really the core of what we're discussing today. The delicatus, or concubinus.
It sounds so gentle. Delicate boy.
It does, doesn't it? But that translation, it completely fails. It doesn't capture the sheer psychological weight, the very specific high-maintenance social role, or this elaborate legal and cultural system that basically controlled the lives of these young male concubines.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to get into the sources, really dig in. We're going past the easy assumptions. We'll be looking at, complaints from moralists like Seneca, the cold hard facts and legal codes.
Yeah, in poetry too, sometimes celebrating them, sometimes mocking. Even the odd gravestone gives us a glimpse.
We really want to unpack how this specific, highly organized form of exploitation became just normal in Rome.
Okay, so to get a handle on the value, we first have to look at the market. How are these boys acquired? And it was, well, pure commodification, just cold.
Right, and the purchase usually happened when they were really young.
Typically, yeah, between about 7 and 14 years old. That was the prime age range for acquisition.
And the process itself. The sources say buyers examine them like livestock. That's brutal. What exactly were they looking for?
I mean, it was physical assessment, checking muscle tone, how flexible they were, their teeth, the quality of their skin, everything. They were looking for this combination of extreme youth, a certain natural grace, and features that looked promising for the future.
And where they came from mattered. You mentioned that huge price tag earlier.
Massively. Origin was a huge factor in the price. Those premium boys, the ones commanding the top prices like 40,000 sesterces, they were often Syrian or Greek.
Why them specifically?
Well, the Romans considered their features ideal. Things like large eyes, naturally soft skin, less body hair, graceful movements. That was the ideal.
And the dealers? They didn't just sell them as found, did they? There was preparation involved.
Oh, absolutely. Slave dealers went to really quite predatory lengths to groom them for sale. We're talking plucking all their body hair, applying cosmetics, but also teaching them specific ways to walk, certain gestures.
Why the specific gestures?
It was all designed to suggest availability, but crucially, while maintaining this kind of air of reluctant innocence, coyness almost. That specific performance was highly valued.
Wow. So the psychological manipulation starts right from the very beginning. There's that quote from Marcus Varius Flaccus, right? The imperial tutor under Augustus. He talked about different kinds of slaves needing different kinds of breaking.
Yes, exactly. He made this distinction. An agricultural slave, faced a tough physical breaking in the fields, hard labor. But a delicatus, Flaccus said, faced a different breaking entirely.
What does that mean in practice? What's that different breaking?
It's about intentionally shattering their sense of self, their spirit, really. It had to be done for them to fit the role. The constant physical scrutiny, the grooming from childhood, it forces them to see themselves as objects, as decoration.
And that performance you mentioned, suggesting innocence while being totally available.
That creates this profound internal conflict, doesn't it? They were trained simultaneously to be companions, beautiful status symbols, and objects for sexual use. That psychological breaking was seen as necessary to make them capable of juggling all those roles under constant watch. And that breaking, that psychological conditioning, leads straight into this weird paradox of privilege they lived under.
Right, because they weren't treated like other slaves necessarily.
Often, no. They were frequently elevated way above the regular household staff. They might wear silk garments, eat the same fine foods as the master, even sleep physically near him, in separate, nicer quarters compared to the rough bunks for other slaves.
So this is kind of gilded cage situation. Elevated, yes, but also completely trapped. Because that privilege, that closeness, it came with a price, didn't it?
An absolute non-negotiable price. Perpetual availability. That was the deal. Total access guaranteed.
And maintaining that status, being that available and privileged object, required a lot of work, years of training.
Intensive training. Yeah, it wasn't enough just to be physically attractive. They had to perform.
Yeah.
There's physical training, dancing, singing, playing musical instruments were pretty standard.
But it wasn't just physical performance, was it? There was intellectual training, too.
Just as rigorous, sometimes more so. This is kind of stunning when you think about it.
Comparable to what a freeborn Roman boy might get.
Yeah.
But obviously for a totally different end goal.
Exactly. They had to memorize vast amounts of Greek and Latin literature, poetry especially, so they could recite it at banquets.
Impressive.
And sometimes more. Education in mathematics, philosophy, rhetoric. It wasn't for their benefit, of course. It was so they could provide sophisticated intellectual companionship, make the master look good, engage his guests.
Plutarch mentions someone like that, doesn't he? A concubine who could discuss Stoic philosophy while serving wine?
He does, yeah, though he calls it an unusual extravagance.
Yeah.
It shows the ideal, though. Beauty, service, and intellectual sparkle.
But the biggest time commitment, the real day-to-day burden, must have been just the physical maintenance, keeping up that appearance.
Hours every single day. Just devoted to looking perfect, looking perpetually young, frozen in time almost.
What did that involve?
Well, the hair was a big thing. Styled very elaborately, often in ways that would be seen as completely effeminate on a free Roman man. And constant, brutal body hair removal. Pumice stones, sharp tweezers, day in, day out.
Ouch.
And cosmetics.
Oh, yeah. Loads of them. White lead paint to get that fashionable pale skin look. Antimony like coal for lining the eyes. Vermilion pigment for the lips. And then just gallons of expensive imported perfumes. From Arabia, India, smell was part of the package.
And then we get into the really disturbing stuff found in the medical texts, trying to literally stop them from maturing.
Yeah, physicians like Cyrannus of Ephesus, his writings reveal these systemic medical interventions, all aimed at preserving this false image of youth. It's quite horrific when you read it.
What kind of treatments are we talking about? Things designed to physically manipulate the body. Bloodletting was common. They believed it kept the skin soft and youthful. Special diets, basically starvation diets to keep them slim. Herbal concoctions given specifically to try and delay their voices from deepening.
God, that's invasive. And the hair removal you mentioned, was that just plucking?
Not just plucking. Permanent pubic hair removal was considered essential to maintain that boy look. So, yes, repeated plucking or using these really harsh, caustic, depilatory creams. Some contain quicklime. Imagine.
It's just terrifying. A systematic, almost scientific effort to keep these children vulnerable. The physical pain involved must have been immense. And the whole point of this incredible expense, the systematic cruelty, it was fundamentally about status, wasn't it?
Absolutely. These concubines were living, breathing status symbols. Having one, especially a beautiful, well-trained one, at your banquet or taking them to the baths or the theater, it broadcasts your wealth, your taste, your power.
Because maintaining one involved, as the sources say, enormous ongoing expense.
Exactly. And that very expense, that normalization of them as luxury items, it fueled this incredibly casual commodification we see in elite life.
Like Marshall's line about them being passed between guests like wine cups at dinner parties.
Right. Just disposable entertainment. Or Petronius writing about boys standing there completely nude beside the dining couches for hours, holding perfume, towels, explicitly available for any guest who took a fancy to them. It turns the whole scene into a kind of marketplace.
So given this absolute objectification, what about the law? Were there any legal protections, anything about castration or age or consent?
For slaves,
Yeah.
essentially none. Castration was technically made illegal by Emperor Domitian around 83 AD.
There's always a but.
Well, the sources are pretty clear. Emperors were considered above such restrictions, and for everyone else. If you wanted a castrated boy, you just bought one who had already been castrated outside the empire, often from the east. So the law was effectively useless.
And the core legal principle remained.
The master had absolute sexual access to all his slaves. Age didn't matter, consent was irrelevant, legally they were property.
Which brings us inevitably to the most extreme and tragic example we have in the sources, the story of Sporus. It just shows the terrifying extent of this dehumanization, especially when combined with imperial power.
Spore says.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the absolute endpoint of this logic. Emperor Nero, after he apparently kicked his pregnant wife Poppaea to death, he seems to have tried to replace her.
With spores.
He had Sporus castrated, then he married him at a public ceremony, dressed the boy in Poppaea's actual clothes, and then commanded everyone in Rome to address Sporus as Empress and Augusta.
It's just madness. Using a person as a prop for his grief or guilt or whatever it was.
A tragic proxy, yeah.
Yeah.
But Sporus' ordeal didn't stop when Nero died.
No, he got passed along, didn't he? Like property, first to Otho, then to Vitellius.
Right, and Vitellius had particularly horrific plans. He was going to force Sporus to publicly reenact the mythical rape of Proserpina in the arena.
A public humiliation framed as entertainment, which would have ended in his death.
Exactly. A final, complete violation.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than face that, Sporus killed himself. He was probably no older than 21.
His story is exceptional because it's imperial, but it really does show the ultimate conclusion of a system where a person is just property, legally unprotected, endlessly available for whatever use the owner decides.
And that systemic violence wasn't just in these extreme imperial cases. It was daily life. We see it reflected in medical texts like from Galen. He treated the grim physical consequences.
What kind of things?
Things like anal fissures, rectal prolapse, chronic pain, all documented as common results requiring specific medical treatment. And the psychological toll, endemic depression, often just noted clinically as a melancholic disposition.
And the violence wasn't just from the master, was it? It came from multiple directions.
It was layered, yeah, obviously from the masters,
Yeah.
but also sometimes from jealous wives. Claudius's wife Messalina was notorious for reportedly having several of Claudius's favorites executed on fake charges, basically out of jealousy, eliminating rivals for attention.
And from other slaves, too.
Absolutely resentful house slaves. They knew the concubinus might have privileges, but they also knew he'd be punished incredibly severely if he ever fought back, no matter who started it. So they were targets from all sides, really.
Yeah.
And if we pull back again, look at the bigger picture, it all comes back to them being classified as essentially capital, just assets.
How do we see that in the records?
Well, the economic records are really clear, especially the papyri we have from Roman Egypt.
Yeah.
They show concubines being literally mortgaged, put up as collateral for loans.
Wow.
Yeah, they were inherited as part of an estate.
Yeah.
And during bad economic times, like the crisis of the 3rd century, they were even traded directly as a form of currency, like carrying gold, but human.
Yeah. So they weren't just decorative luxuries. They were actual economic instruments. Tax records listed them alongside farm animals and tools.
Precisely. Assessed right alongside livestock and agricultural gear. And that definition, chattel capital, that determined absolutely everything about their lives, including any chance of agency.
Could they have any agency at all? Could they own anything save money?
They could, theoretically, accumulate something called peculium, that was like a small allowance or savings from gifts that Roman law allowed slaves to hold, though technically it still belonged to the master.
And could that lead to freedom, manumission?
Sometimes, yes, if they managed to save enough or if the master chose to grant it. But
there's another but. Freedom wasn't always real freedom, especially for them.
Rarely true independence. Because the manumission documents, the freedom papers, very often included these explicit clauses, stipulations requiring the now freedmen to continue providing sexual availability to their former master.
For how long?
Sometimes for a set period, sometimes literally for the rest of their lives. So the legal chains might be gone, but the economic leash, the sexual obligation remained. The master kept access to his valuable capital.
And the physical layout of the houses, the villas, actually reflected this status too. Available, but separate.
Exactly that. Villas often had specific sleeping chambers designed for them. Close enough to the master's own rooms for easy access, definitely convenient, but structurally separate from the main family living areas, kept apart.
And art reflects this too. The paintings from Pompeii and Herculaneum.
Yeah, those famous wall paintings often show these idealized, very sanitized scenes. Beautiful boys elegantly serving wine or reclining gracefully. It's how the Romans wanted to see it or wanted it portrayed.
Completely.
Glossing over the violence inherent in the whole setup.
But despite that sanitization, despite the system, sometimes tiny traces of the individual person break through in the archaeological record.
We do find them. Small things. A discarded bronze mirror found in one of those tiny sleeping cells. Hairpin made of bone. Graffiti scratched onto a wall. Just these little flickers that remind you there was a human being there, resisting erasure, even in small ways.
And this whole system wasn't monolithic across the empire, right? There were regional variations.
Definitely. Roman practices would merge with local customs. So in Greece, it might blend with older pederastic traditions. In Egypt, you might find concubines coming from formerly respected priestly families who'd fallen on hard times. And initially, the Romans thought British slaves were too crude for this role before Romanization took hold, and they entered the market too.
So we've looked at these ancient sources, and they really document these persistent patterns, don't they? Economic need, legal weakness, the way human bodies get turned into commodities, and how society just normalizes it.
And the crucial point, I think, is that these aren't just dusty historical patterns safely locked away in the past. They are depressingly similar to the dynamics, the structural weaknesses that enable human trafficking today.
Right. The names change, the contexts shift, but the basic mechanisms of turning people into property, they remain disturbingly familiar.
Chillingly similar. Yeah.
And we should probably acknowledge there's an ongoing debate among historians about how to interpret all this.
There is. Some scholars really focus on finding those moments of agency, of resistance by the concubines themselves, trying to recover some sense of their self-determination from the fragments we have.
Which is important work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But other scholars push back a bit, emphasizing the overwhelming structural violence. They argue, that focusing too much on the rare, exceptional cases risks minimizing the sheer scale of the systematic oppression faced by the thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, whose names and stories are just completely lost.
And maybe that silence is the most powerful evidence we have.
I think it is. The vast majority of these individuals left no trace in the records. No names, no voices, certainly no first-person accounts. We study what Rome considered normal for these concubines, not just to understand Rome's own brutal reality.
But also to understand something about us, about the human capacity to make horrific things seem mundane.
Exactly. Just through the simple, devastating act of looking away, of accepting something as just the way things are.
So maybe we leave you, the listener, with this thought. When you look at power structures, at exploitation, not just in history, but now, ask yourself not just why this happened then, but maybe what systemic cruelties are we looking past right now?
What have we, in our own time, allowed to become normal? The history of the Roman concubine isn't just about Rome. It's a really profound, uncomfortable mirror. It reminds us that civilization and systemic cruelty have, historically, often walked hand in hand.